Hello, everyone. It's Thursday. It's almost the weekend. Maybe the people that don't work on Fridays, this could be your Friday. But we have another session of the MSP Initiative Live. Today we have Garrison from Nerdio joining us today for the very first time. How you doing today, Garrison?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing okay. Garrison was on the Channel Strong tour last month, or at least for a week you were.
Yes, I
And
caught the second week.
yeah, well, how did that feel?
It was awesome. Being in front of MSPs again, face to face, was something I missed so much over the last year, and so it was great just to meet with people and get out there in the community and have some conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have a favorite stop on the tour? Favorite city? Favorite local parking lot?
Gosh, did I have a favorite? They all blurred together, but the last one that was at a like this completely redone, like I guess it was there was this whole setup, like there was a brewery.
The old mill.
Yeah, no, that was
yeah.
an awesome location. It made me wish I worked there too. It was nice.
Yeah, that's right. They took an old mill and they turned it into an office building, but then in the back part of it, they had this really cool brewery with an open floor, a wide open floor plan. And then outside of that, they had a big giant patio that overlooked this area and then a big giant movie screen. So they had it set up for social distancing so people could watch movies from anywhere and not be on top of each other, but have a few drinks up on the patio. Yeah, it was a really nice setup.
Yeah, it was. I know while we were there, they had a live band playing, and the people were picnicking out on this lawn area, and there was a river running by. It was nice.
Wow, I will say there are some cool MSP offices out there that you just never get a chance to walk into, right? I mean, especially not in the last several months, but I mean, some of these places are actually pretty. They put a lot of thought and time into it, right? I'm not expecting a slide at every joint, but like JP's place in Texas was pretty unique, right? Everybody has like a different setup. It's not just like, regular offices with cubes.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Well, hey, Garrison, I really appreciate you, coming out on the tour. We understand it's not easy for people to take a week out of their time, but we sure appreciated you.
Well, I was glad to be there. It was a very cool setup. I actually got to ride all the way home on the bus, which was a nice extra perk.
Yeah, you didn't even need an airline ticket back, right?
No.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I got to spend the last day. Got to spend the last day with Garrison and Slade. The morning, have breakfast, sit on the bus, and chill out before they took off. And I almost had to come with them because things were getting delayed at the airport. So Slade was telling me, "Come back, they'll drive you."
There you go.
I was telling Kenny to come with me, and then up rolls this Maserati Uber that he gets. Literally,
Maserati Uber. What was it?
I did not hand pick this car. It just was hard to get cars, so I had to Uber X, which wasn't that much money. It was like $9, and because the airport was fairly close, so I'm like, whatever. Uber X, $9. They're going to get here faster than anybody else. Click it. And the guy showed up really fast, but it was a Maserati. No joke.
Wow. Interesting. Well, you didn't even have surge pricing, huh?
Nope.
Wow. Okay.
Nope. Right $9 from the hotel to the airport, and it was an interesting ride. The kid that was driving me was a pretty interesting kid.
Was it stolen?
No. The inside of the car wasn't as nice as the outside. I'll tell you that. He definitely had he had like a plastic bag over the back seat or something. I wasn't sure if he was gonna, that was my last ride, if you know what I mean. He was gonna just wrap me up in the trash bag and throw me somewhere. But he was an interesting kid working his way, trying to make money the best way he knew how. And he was like, but I'm lazy, so this is the job. I do this and I don't do it a lot. He's like, if I was doing this the way I should be, I'd probably make six figures, but I'm just not that I'm not that driven, he says to me.
Well,
said, okay.
You know what? These days, Uber and Lyft can be lucrative because there's a lot less people doing it.
That's right.
So all that supply demand surge pricing's for real.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So actually, Garrison's based out of Nashville, as we probably put together, and Nashville's been more on lock than not. I hope. Is it open now? What's the deal with Nashville?
It's starting to open up a good bit. Davidson County itself, there are a lot of people who have at least gotten their first vaccination. And if you go down and look on Broadway now, it pretty much looks like it used to. So it's definitely getting better.
That's good. I know Franklin County next door is a little bit more lax.
Yeah.
But we experienced that early on in the in pandemic times. Just driving by, we're like, oh, okay, it's wide open, fantastic. All right, right on. Well, let's get on to the more educational portion of this. So, for anyone that doesn't know you, Garrison, or ultimately doesn't know what Nerdio is, why don't you kind of give everybody a little bit of walk down memory lane as far as you and how you got into the technology space?
Sure.
And then a little bit about what Nerdio is and why it was created.
Okay. Well, me personally, I'm a partner sales executive at Nerdio today. But I started my journey into the MSP space back in 2005. Like a lot of small MSPs, I started almost accidentally. I was working IT at a company and things weren't going like I wanted. So I hung up a shingle and I was that guy working out of my car, doing break fix before I even knew what managed services were or could be. Fast forward a couple of years and we stumbled across some great resources of these people saying, hey, what if you just charged a flat fee? And so we jumped in and started doing that. And I ran that MSP for about 10 years, sold it in 2015. And then after I got out of that, did a few different things, but I'd had a chance to kind of dip my toe in the vendor side of the world because of some solutions that we were selling to MSPs, and I loved it. I loved talking to MSPs every day. And, one of the things I loved about my business was I got to work with small business owners, and then getting to work with all MSPs was just kind of a dream of mine. Like, it's fun and it's something I understand. And, I've been there to some degree. And so when I had an opportunity to enter into the vendor side of the channel, I jumped at it. And that's my job now. I talk to MSPs every day, all day long, hear about their problems. Certainly can relate to a lot of those. That brings us to Nerdio, of course, and what seems to be the future now that was really fast forwarded into cloud and Windows Virtual Desktop, Windows 10 multi-session. And having those conversations with people where some MSPs come to us and they've never really looked at Azure. They know what it is, of course, but they've never really stepped into it. And so I'm getting to talk to them not just about how they can leverage Nerdio to do that more effectively and efficiently, and really kind of jump ahead of the curve, but how do you price it? How do you package it? How do you go talk to clients about this? What's the value proposition? All of those kinds of things are the kinds of things I do in my day-to-day. So I certainly, part of my job is to help people understand what partnering with Nerdio looks like. But the bigger part of my job is, a sales enablement resource of, what does it look like to build a cloud practice? And that's with or without Nerdio, right? Like, what does this business look like? And how can you jump on board and really go out there and make some money? And then when I get to talk to MSPs that are able to use it to leverage WVD and leverage a new solution, and all of a sudden go from, making 15% to 50% on their solution stack. That's awesome, because those are great stories, and it's fun to be a part of that. And I love the MSP space in general. People are so friendly and easy to talk to, and really open up and get into some of these problems and how we can overcome them. And so Nerdio is well situated for that. I'm very lucky that they enable us to have that kind of conversation. This is not just, hey, I'm trying to sell you on a SKU and take it or leave it. This is let's talk about the bigger problem at hand. How do you do this? You might be trying to reimagine what your business looks like, and having the chance to talk about that in a really low pressure situation where it works or it doesn't work. And
okay, well, let's break that apart for a second. So number one, I think there's three pools. This is my opinion, for whatever it's worth. There's three pools. There's the guys that
Buckle up, Garrison. Buckle up.
Hold
Here
on,
it
hold
comes.
on,
No,
hold
I
on.
know.
Hold on. Here, this is going to be very, very logical. Okay. There's the guys that say, I can't make the cloud math work. It's just like when I price it out with putting the box on-prem or in the closet or in the rack versus the reoccurring, sometimes very variable cost, even if you get it to a fixed cost, they say you get to about 1.5, years in, and then all of a sudden, or 2 years in, and the math just goes the other way. And then how do you cost justify? So they just don't, right? And they just put the box in because they know the box will last the 5 years, and they'll put the warranty on it, and life goes on. So that's guy number one.
Yep.
Guy number two is, hey, I already played around with renting a rack in a data center and just throw a couple servers in, and it's close enough that I can walk in the front door if I need to make a change. And we're gonna make money doing this because I can I have fixed cost here where everything else is variable, and I have control, and I'll price it so that it's competitive, and I'm gonna do it that way, right? And then there's the guys, I'm gonna call it guy number three is kind of where you guys are talking about. Either A, they'll call up Microsoft directly. Good luck if they get to the right person. Or they'll call up a distributor like our friend at Ken and Company at PAX 8 and say, hey, I got what's this Azure thing? I know I got some credit in my action pack. Like, where do I get started? Point me to the right place. Or they'll call up potentially a guy like Nerdio and say, how do you make this easier for me? Because this seems really complicated. I can't figure out the 800-page manual Microsoft just sent me. So those are the three buckets, in my opinion, right?
Good.
I guess there is a fourth bucket where they really are resellers of other cloud platforms, right? And they're like this whole, hey, $250 in, they'll handle it all. You get a commission. It's almost like an agent, right? Where they're like, you're just passing it to somebody else. So those are the four scenarios, right? Of people out there. Do you disagree with my 4-man, presentation? Is there a spot that I missed, or do you generally feel that I laid out all of the pieces?
I think that's a good segmentation. I think that's fair.
All right. So let's actually go through this logically. And for people who are in these buckets, let's hear what you like. What is your presentation? What is your position to the guy that's like, hey, I'm going to go price at a Dell server. Bucket number one. I'm going to go price at a Dell server. It's going to cost me $6,000. By the time I math out what the cloud price is, at least from whatever they're looking at, whatever calculator they touched on, about a little over a year, I start winning, right? Because the cloud starts costing me more, a year and a half, or whatever it is. What's your position to that guy?
So I think that there are a bunch of components here, but I'll try to
Sure.
narrow it down.
Listen, if you think I should expand, feel free. But like, I'm just trying to, like,
Sure.
I imagine the conversations I have every day. And this conversation is not, seldom, right? It comes up a lot. And usually these are the guys that fit in these buckets. But listen, you talk to people a lot more about this conversation than I do. So if you feel that I'm too narrow, bump out.
No, I think you're good. So that bucket one. I think the biggest challenge I would give that is that if you're comparing, and I would agree, if you're comparing straight hardware cost of one server to the cloud, then that one server is going to win every time, just on paper, because you're not actually looking at the whole picture. And so it's really, really important that you actually change your methodology for sales, your approach to this, your whole mentality, and convert it to one of a value conversation and not just pure cost conversation.
Okay.
And it's not that different than when people move from break fix to MSP, right? Because I was in that seat. 2006, my business partner comes along and says, we should do managed services. Read this book. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, we know what we're charging people. We have a pretty good idea. When things break, we go fix it. This is working. Why should we move? And once we got into it, having that understanding that, hold on a second, the value we can bring small businesses with managed services far exceeds what we could do with break fix, because with break fix, we're only fixing problems that are like critical, right? We're not actually helping them grow their business. We're not giving them a consistent cost. There are all of these things that go into that.
It's the emergency room, right? Like, I'm bleeding, stop my bleeding, but it's not the, hey, come back every year and make sure that your blood pressure's low. I got
Right,
it.
and it doesn't feel good to, at least to me, it didn't feel good to make money on people's pain all the time. That was, I mean, that was.
You should ask all the urgent care companies out there. Maybe they have a different opinion, but I hear what you're saying.
They might. And cloud is very similar to that. It's not identical, but it's very similar because the value proposition of business continuity, the consistency, buying what you need when you need it, ease of use, ease of access, all of those things go into that conversation. So if you start there, if you start in that conversation with the client and you're talking about all of that, by the time you get to cost, it doesn't matter what it is. Like the cost is easy at that point. And so that's my challenge to that. It's if you're in that mind space, this is a mental barrier to overcome. And if you as an MSP aren't ready to do that, that's okay.
But you were an MSP. Ken was an MSP. I still have a sister company MSP that I'm not in day to day, but like there is a bean counter somewhere, right? There is a check signer somewhere that says, well, wait a minute. I'm looking at the left, I'm looking at the right, I'm looking at total cost of ownership, at least the way it's presented on paper. Why not? Why just not buy the server, right? It's your interest is low. I don't even have to buy it, right? I could lease it out at 2% or whatever, and we're good.
You could, but understand the other costs, understand potential issues, right? Let's say that all of a sudden the entire world shuts down and you have to work from home.
I think there was a movie on that.
Yeah, we're living it right now.
If I had told you that 3 years ago, you would have been like, that's never going to happen. Right. And I would have said, you're probably right. And is it going to happen again? Probably not. But these kinds of things and being able to anticipate that and change quickly is something that the cloud, leveraging the cloud lets you do that you can't do in an on-premise scenario. Not to mention all of the like truly enterprise level solutions that are available and easy to manage in the cloud that you're still not going to do in that on-prem scenario. And that does take educating yourself as an MSP on, okay, what are the differences? Why is this going to let me be more efficient internally so that my costs are where they should be? But how does this also help the client? That gets into a whole nother conversation. I think that we've seen MSPs, and in my opinion, they're an unsung hero in this whole thing over the last year, because you had a business model that was pitched, proposed, and agreed on that said, we're going to charge a certain amount per user. And it made assumptions that everyone would be in one spot. And that cost was very fixed and understood. And we have years and years of history where we can look at that and say, yes, I can take averages and I know what this is going to cost me. And then the whole thing went out the window. But I haven't actually talked to a single MSP that raised their prices. They continue to charge the same that they did, but their entire environment they're supporting changed. It is costing them more. Their profit has to have gone down. They look at those numbers, they'll see that. And we're coming to a time where they need to have that conversation with the client. Hey, if things don't go back to the way they were, which they're not going to, then we're going to have to reevaluate the way we're charging you. Or we could reevaluate the way we are providing our services to you. And by moving to cloud, you're able to actually centralize a lot more of what you're supporting so that those endpoints don't become, they're not an issue anymore, right?
So what about the bizarro version of this guy, right? What about the guy that says, I really don't have anything that's, other than a file share, right? I really don't have anything that's requiring the machine, right? I'm on QuickBooks Online. I finally abandoned QuickBooks Desktop. I can't believe we didn't do that earlier. I don't have a line of business application that's legacy that can't go onto the more modern, like web-based, SaaS-based play, right? So why don't I just do OneDrive, Business Premium, and a little bit of SharePoint Online, and go to that?
You're good. So there are two factors there. One, there are some clients that's the right fit for. It just is. And that's okay, right? But if you dig into some of the additional costs as an MSP that you'll have to go through because of that, as far as supporting that endpoint, right? Endpoint dies. How much time does it take to actually get it back to where it needs to be? Because your end user's they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to set up their own user and get OneDrive working like it used to, and all of the shortcuts and all of that kind of thing. And so that's part of it, that cost there. The other piece is how sensitive is that client to data loss, data theft, data control. because we're starting to see, I'm having more and more conversations where we're getting people that call in that are in the exact scenario that you just described, but they really have some compliance issues. They really are bound to HIPAA, but they've kind of just let it slide. But it's an issue because they don't have control of the data at the endpoint. And so WVD lets them do that. It lets them give them an actual Windows 10 environment. So it's not RDS, right? It actually looks like the Windows they're used to, but it also lets them control that data. It lets them turn it off very quickly. It lets them track it. And so that's where, even in the scenario you're describing, we start to see people still go to a WVD type solution.
Hey, Garrison, I wanted to ask as we're going through this, and George's questions are always so good. They draw you out. They do draw you out. He's like the guy that, they used to make people cry on ESPN, draw the athletes out and make them cry, right? Bring it out.
You're not going to make me cry, are you?
Not going to make me cry, no. But some good points here. So for you, especially in what Nerdio does, before pre-COVID, it was like pulling teeth getting people to go to the cloud and explain why the cloud was the direction to go, right? And we all know the stories of how it's increased at least 10x, advanced the cloud, advanced security. So can you give us, because George and I, we did the tour for many weeks before this last tour and into this last tour. We've heard so many stories, but I'd love to hear your best story of somebody who was just, you had in a headlock all the way up until COVID, and then you were about to give up, and then COVID hit, and they turned around and came back to you and said, first, we need to do this. And then when they did it, what was it like for them? Were they really surprised? Like, wow, this was something we should have did long before COVID.
Well, you put me in a tough spot there. For one, I started at Nerdio during COVID. So
that's right.
I don't have a pre-COVID story that is my own exactly, but I do know a lot of MSPs and talk to them about their journey on this. And there's one particular MSP that I'm very close to, and he was in that boat. He's like, I see that this is coming. It's kind of interesting, played with it, wasn't pitching it to clients, but because he had already exposed himself and his engineering team to Azure, they knew about it. They had some comfort level that it could work. They were in a position when COVID hit that they could turn it on very, very quickly. And then all of a sudden they had these small businesses that were just coming out of the woodwork. We need to figure this out. And for whatever reason, those businesses were in a position where they weren't going to try to halfway do it. And I've heard of a lot of people who, like, they took their desktops home, or they've set up like a go-to meeting or whatever they're using to remote into those desktops, and that works. It's not very eloquent. And so he was ready, and it was just a driving force, right? It was like, okay, well, now it's time to go, and we have all these people that need this. And he didn't have to scramble so hard because he'd already had exposure to it and played with it. And that's been a huge win for him. And it's let him start to build a true Azure practice and true cloud practice. And we do see that, in the MSPs that I talk to every day that were already ready. It was very easy for them to transition. On the flip side of that, I talk to MSPs more frequently than I would like that call me, and they're like, so we have a client that's about to leave because they found another MSP because they wanted to move to cloud, and they thought we didn't do it.
Oh.
And so now they're about to lose a client because they weren't part of the conversation. And it wasn't that they couldn't do it. They certainly have the capability to do it, but they hadn't invested in it. They hadn't spoken to people about it. But I do a sales webinar every week on how to sell WVD. And that's one of the basic tenets of that is go have QBRs, have regular meetings with your clients, talk to them about technology that's out there so you understand their business and what they're wanting to do and what you can do for them.
Do you feel like a lot of that is that the old fear of change, right? You get stuck in your ways and you feel like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, so you don't want to make that change. Now, what are some of the factors that play into that?
That's absolutely part of it. It's the inertia factor, right? Like you just keep moving along at the pace that you've been moving. No reason to change. But we all know with technology that that's just not a realistic, you know, place to put your stake in the ground.
Right.
It is always changing. And it is because it's always changing that we actually continue to have the jobs we have. We need people that are smart enough and curious enough to go out there and figure this stuff out. But when people do fall into that trap, that rut, it's I think it's just it's human nature, right? Like you said. What are the key reasons that people do that? I mean, I think they're probably as old as time, right?
Yeah.
All right. I'm coming back to scenario 2.
I knew he wasn't getting past it.
No. All right, data center guy, right? Hey, I found a data center nearby me. I bought some servers. I put it in the rack. I'm a hoster. Why do I got to pay Microsoft or Google or Azure or Amazon or Alibaba or whoever else when I can just do it myself? Make some good money. What do you think of that?
I love these actually because there are constraints that are in place there that you will hit, right? If you've set an agreement with your colo and you took down, let's say you took down 5 racks, or you have, you know, an option to add racks, there's still a constraint there, and there's a lot of additional costs, a lot of additional things that can break. You've got, if you're doing it right, you've got redundant data, you've got redundant power, you got all these things that you're doing. You also have true physical hardware that will break. But the constraints I see people get into most often are tied directly to time, and it's the growth inside of that equipment, right? So they're adding clients, and that's putting a strain on the resources they have available from a CPU perspective, and I would even say more importantly, a data perspective. I know you can tell me all day data is cheap. Data is not cheap in those scenarios. And it's especially not cheap to do upgrades and expansions because the costs for that are very labor intensive. They're training intensive. There's the licensing aspect. I can tell you how many people I talked to that are in that scenario, and they invested up front and they got all the licensing they needed. And now we're 3 years down the road and they haven't upgraded. And so there starts to be security risk there too. So there are a lot of constraints that at first blush are not so easy to see. If you've already invested in that though, I'm not going to tell you just to jump ship. Like that doesn't make sense. But lay out a plan, look at the costs inside of Azure and look at what it looks like to have a growth plan there. The ability to expand as you go is tremendous. I mean, we're talking the difference, a storage expansion, right? Difference between tens of thousands of dollars in hardware and thousands of dollars in time to do an upgrade in your data center versus 3 clicks through Nerdio. I mean, it's not cut and dry. So that's the
back to your like. This is your comment about data's cheap. I mean, isn't there a demarcation point though? Like if you are pumping a lot of data, terabytes and terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data, at some point, unless you go back and get some sort of discount, you know, because you've hit a critical mass, and sometimes that number with the big guys is so large that you can't, you know, like I remember one time, like we went and we were talking to an Amazon guy, an Amazon rep on a project, and he's like, yeah, when your Netflix size, come back and talk to me, we'll talk about that discount. And I was like, yeah, you got it, pal. You know, like the answer was no, it wasn't coming, right? So like, you know, at some point, if they do grow, right, if somebody actually does do it, right, hundreds of servers and, you know, petabytes of data, you know, isn't there a math conversion point where it doesn't make sense?
Does it make sense to go Azure, or does it make sense to stay?
Doesn't make sense to stay in the public cloud, any provider.
Well, yeah, if you're Azure, it does. I mean, right? I mean, because of what you just talked about, right? Those discounts, the reality is that most MSPs don't set up those data centers in a way that they're going to operate efficiently and effectively long term. So I would tell you, if I put my MSP hat on, I'd say, if you're going to do that, you need to be ready and prepared to sell your business in 18 months, because that's going to be the point where it's sweetest. And maybe it's not 18, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 24. But once you get to a refresh cycle on that hardware, unless you have expanded your scale tremendously, which maybe some of them have, but none of the ones that I've talked to have. Of course, that's probably why they're calling me. But if you're not ready for that and planning on it, and you have a significant amount of money that you're going to reinvest, and you understand those costs, and you're looking 5-10 years down the road, there's a very short window where the profit on that is very good, and the multiples are going to be great if you exit. But as soon as you turn that corner, you're in trouble.
Okay, it's good to know. So like the baby step past that, I'm just reshuffling my order here, is the guy who gets pitched by a company who says, listen, we'll do it all, right? We'll charge $200, $250, $175, pick your number, right? Everybody has a slightly different number, right? And like, you don't have to manage anything, right? Like there just needs to be a dummy terminal that connects, right? And it's all on somebody else, and you just get your cut back from that. So basically a guy that's graduated from position 2 and 3, right? Who's turned around trying to do scale, pitching the MSP saying, hey, this model's great because your investment in time should be dramatically low.
Yeah. So I think that can work. I think that you can make a small to moderate margin on that. It will be very predictable. Good. But you won't have the opportunity to get 40, 50, 60% ever. I like to get 40, 50, 60%. I think a lot of MSPs do, but not all of them do. I kind of think that model is similar, and there's a place for this. There are people that do this successfully, but if you completely outsource your full help desk and your full NOC and all of those things, that is a choice. That's a strategy. But you're giving up a lot of money and passing it on to other people, and you're not getting rid of a lot of the problems that you're going to have. In fact, you have to be so process driven to make that work. And I find a lot of people that get into that don't actually have a full visibility or understanding the technology that they're providing. And so it starts to really break down when they have to have those business level conversations with the small businesses they're supporting. But there's a place for it. There is a window where you can do that. The other side of that is that most of the MSPs I talk to like to have more control than you can get in those scenarios. They want to control when Windows patches go out. They want to control when QuickBooks gets updated. They want to be able to do that. And in those scenarios, they start to lose some of that control. And so they can't protect themselves against issues that they know are potential problems. They're bound to those companies that are actually providing the service for them.
Sure. So then there's, the guy number 4, right? We said 4A, 4B, right? 4A is guy who's, I'm going to do this on my own, right? I have some action pack credit, right, with Microsoft, or I have a trial, or I have some, sometimes there are these programs, right, where like the Amazons of the world and whatever, it gives you like a startup credit, right, to get you started, whatever. But then they're literally starting with a blank slate, right? Like they're literally watching videos and going through PDFs on how to create stuff, right? And then the problem there is that they don't really know what their monthly cost is. It's not fixed, right? I guess at the really, really small size, there's these little bubbles you can guide that are like flat feed, but like they're so small that they don't even really fit the bill. You got to get into the actual stuff you need is all variable stuff most of the time. I guess there's a scenario of, and again, there's all these different pricing components, right? Hey, if I reserve something for 3 years out, then I guess I could get a flat price that's a little bit lower, or even some of the bigger providers like an Azure, Amazon, Google are now even offering dedicated servers, right? Where, they're very expensive, but they're dedicated to you, so you know what your price is, kind of thing. So there's a guy that's literally starting from zero, right? Like kind of to your story, somebody came to him, said cloud, they really rushed right away, right? Last second, tried to glue something together and said, oh, here you go. And then the bill came the next month and they're like, what did I do? Like, this is not good. I'm losing money basically, right?
Yeah.
That happens a lot. I'm sure Ken's laughing because he gets this crap all day long. I'm sure I definitely heard some stories like this in the parking lots, by the way. Like they just rapid fired thinking that it was like so easy a caveman can do it, Staples easy button. And
Right.
then the bill came and they couldn't figure out what direction was up. That's
Okay.
that's guy 4A. Tell me why that's. I mean, it's still it's not like it can be a problem. This happens every day.
I
So
know. If they use Nerdio, that goes away. Sorry, go ahead. Good.
you're right. You're right. That's my favorite scenario. Because
Well, hold on, before you even say something, there's some people that have stumbled their way through this, and then by the time they find the Nerdio, they're like, "Well, I already figured it out. I spent my tens of thousands of dollars."
I don't know. I don't think that that's the case. You can't figure it out. Every case is different. Every instance that you open in Azure is different. So you have to manage each one of those instances. I don't know that somebody could figure out that whole process. And by the way, once they did, if they think that that's a good idea for them to manage that instead of having something like Nerdio where you go like this, click, click.
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The part of Nerdio that I love is you get it in place and you can have an admin push buttons. You don't have to have Azure experts running it once it's in place and doing its thing.
you're right. Well, and this is two different parts to this.
Right. There's 4A and 4B, right? 4A is I'm gonna figure it out on my own because I'm Mr. MSP and I gotta figure it out the way I like it, and you're just gonna have to let me go through my process before I crash and hit the wall, right?
Yeah. So all day long, every day, I'm talking to those MSPs that did figure it out. And so you're saying, well, they figured it out. Why would they call us?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they figured it out. And then there's this huge portion of what they're doing to help control costs. Mostly that's going to be around things like auto scaling, auto healing, the scripting side. Right now, they've got a guy in a room writing those scripts and they break constantly. He's having to update them. It's not really working exactly like they want it to. It's just close enough. And they look at Nerdio, they install it. They don't need any help from us because they totally, completely understand Azure. They put it in and they're like, this is life-changing. Like, I can sleep at night. I don't have to pay this guy this extra amount anymore. I don't have to worry about him leaving. All the kinds of things. If you think about RMM tools, right? You've got a smattering of options for RMM. Some of them take really hiring at least one person that completely and totally understands how to roll that out and manage it and script it and all of that. If they leave, you're in trouble, right? You've got some that have a lot more automation to that. They already have their own team that's figuring that stuff out, in theory. So there's a decision there, right? If you're getting into it initially, you don't want to go and roll out an RMM where you basically have to build the whole thing from scratch. Maybe your guys already know how to write all of those scripts. They understand how to automate all of that, but you don't want to dedicate the resources to it. And that's why MSPs are using, Nerdio that are more mature in the Azure spaces, because we're able to just cut out a ton of overhead for them, a lot of worry, a lot of the complication, and make it much, much easier. And Ken spoke to this, so that they can move like the day-to-day management of Azure from that tier 3 guy that they really need working on projects and billing $250 an hour down to a tier 1, tier 2. And so that you can go and they can take care of those things. It's very consistent. I mean, and some of this stuff is small. You open Nerdio, you go to the same place to make every change that you're going to make. It's the same today as it was a year ago. You open Azure, you don't know where. I mean, it literally, they move around all the time. So that's why people that are already in Azure come to us. And that's why it's important. Now, they already understand a lot of the costing, they understand the levers they're going to pull. But we can help with that as well. And even with those guys, I get into conversations where, like, why are you using this server here? Why are you not using reservations right here? Why are you not using Azure Hybrid Benefit? Why aren't you doing auto scaling with this? And it's because they couldn't figure it out. Like, they beat their head against the wall and they're like, we'll just do it this way. We'll charge the client more.
But let me ask you this question, like, square peg round hole. What happens if the way they configured their stuff in Azure, like, doesn't necessarily plug into how Nerdio does things?
I haven't come across that issue.
Okay.
So we lay right on top of their existing Azure environment. They still go to the PAX 8s of the world to get their Azure resources and the 365. We don't get in the way of that at all. And we definitely are going to make recommendations, right? Like, and that's a big part of what I do. It's really outside of our scope to a degree for me to go in and say, yeah, why did you set this QuickBooks server up like this? Like, that's on you, right? But I'm glad to have this conversation because I see it every day. And I can be like, you need to tweak this, tweak that. So that's, what is that, 4B or 4A?
That's 4A. 4B is I'm number one, I don't want to spend the time to figure this out on my own. I don't have the time to actually do it. I don't have the dedicated resource to figure it out. And I want to start with, the whole thing templated out because frankly, otherwise I'll never get to a point where I know what the hell is going on.
Right. So we're perfect for that.
Yeah.
I don't tell people we're a replacement for Azure Knowledge because I don't think we should. I think you need to learn about Azure as you go. But we can speed up your ability to adopt because we make it so easy. Literally is push a button, let it spin everything up and go. But the very first hurdle to get over, which you spoke to, is, okay, well, how much is this going to cost? And can I actually make this low enough that I can make good margin on it and predictable enough that I can do it over time, right? And so we've got an awesome cost estimator that helps do that. We're within 5% of accurate on that. And so when you say you can't get a predictable price, I'd say that's incorrect, right? That's a misconception because people don't understand the levers that they can pull that completely lock in 85% of the cost for sure. And then the rest of it is averages, those are risks you're already taking in your managed services, right? You know that some clients are going to run you ragged and maybe you make 5% on them. And some clients aren't and you're going to make 60. And you're playing the averages across your clients. And you're going to work to improve that 5%er or get rid of them. But when you go in, the expectation is that you're going to be able to manage that. You're taking on some of the risk. It's what the client likes, right? I'm going to give you this price and now it's on me. And if I can make things run more efficiently and you don't call me for 2 months at a time, then we're both happy. And that same concept applies to Azure is, all right, we're going to lock in everything we can. There's going to be some variability, but it's a very small percentage of the overall potential cost. And then I'm going to put,
when you say lock in though, I mean, the price changes. I mean, Microsoft price PAX 8 sends price changes out every month. Hey, Microsoft's updated like 50 SKUs. Here you go. Have a nice day. Right. Like it happens. How do you like, sometimes those are in the downward direction, which means you win, but sometimes they raise them too. Right. So like, how do you like 5% within that month or how do you,
So the two biggest cost drivers inside of Azure are your OS, renting your OS, and your VM, right? Your actual resources that you're using. And you can lock both of those in for 3 years. You know exactly what they're going to cost.
Okay.
And so that's the biggest percentage.
Is the 3-year price lock, which is an agreement now between you and Microsoft, is that with the end user in Microsoft or is that with the partner in Microsoft?
With the partner.
So if the customer disappears, that's a sandwich in a I call it a crap sandwich, right?
Maybe. So there are options to adjust those, but I wouldn't even get into that. Let's say, all right, if you leave a reservation early, then Microsoft said we're going to charge you 12% for the remaining use. So if there are 24 months left in that, you'll pay 12% of whatever the cost is. That's predictable. You know exactly what that is. Microsoft may or may not charge you that, but I'll leave that between the partner and Microsoft.
Well, just real quick, Garrison, on that, wouldn't it be a smart move to build into your agreement that if they pull out early, we're going to charge them 15%?
That's one choice. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you can get them to pay, sure.
So
listen, a lot, like we know the 10,000 variables of why people split up, right? But like one of them is they're not paying. or you're
Right,
never
but
going to get them to pay, right?
but this is I think that's the biggest thing though, is look at your MSP and how many of your clients over the last 3 years did you lose? And if it's such a large number that you're worried about that 12% you're going to have to pay, then you have a much bigger problem.
Yeah. Good
There-
point.
There's something else going on. And so you can easily say, okay, how many did I lose? Did I lose 1? Did I lose 3? I don't know any MSPs that have, I mean, it's not like they're bragging about the clients that they've lost, but I mean, not many. MSPs don't lose clients. Like
I agree with that. I do agree with that statement, Garrison. That's been coming up quite a bit lately, and I agree with that. I know one of the studies was saying that there was this 10%, and I'm like, that's not even close. It's not even close. MSPs don't lose. I mean, George, I'm sure your MSP hasn't lost 10% year over year. And I would think any MSP that would have bigger problems, to Garrison's point.
But lost. I mean, listen, there's two calculations, right?
Yeah, I know.
Put it all together, they're gone. You're never talking to them again, or
Right.
they had to shrink maybe by half or a third, or
Right.
I hope that's maybe we're starting to see the turnaround, right? Where like now they're starting to come back, but that shrinkage period, right? I mean, unless when that happens, you're in a very uncomfortable situation because your price is here, right? You've reserved it, you've locked it in to get that cheaper price, and now all of a sudden the customers are down here, right? Like,
right, you got to pick and choose. You got to pick and choose the one to I think where Garrison was going, and we'll let him finish. But I do believe that you do pick and choose there too. I mean, look, when you're talking about attrition from an MSP perspective, for me, in the many years of doing it, the biggest ones were acquisition, where the worst one I ever had was one of my companies acquired the other one, and because of their size decided to hire internally, so they let us go, right? So I lost two $15,000 a month deals in 1 month. Pretty big hit to take. 30,000 grand, right? 30,000 grand. All right. So 30,000, right? Yeah, exactly. It's a lot. I'm trying to expense it. So from that standpoint, that hurts, and I can roll back to that at any time. But when I look back at people who actually, like, I lost clients, I can't really count on too many fingers the ones that I lost like that. When I started getting things into a certain maturity level, I'll say. When we were first starting and we were taking anything and rolling through, it was definitely different. But from a mature standpoint, most mature MSPs don't lose, have a lower percentage of just actually losing clients. And George, you make a good point about the shrinkage part of it, because businesses, you can't control the businesses you work with having shrinkage. Although nowadays, I think with education, you can, by helping them grow and showing them the same things that as MSPs we're learning, right? Showing them PPP loans, showing them all the things we were talking about that we were doing for the MSPs should have also been done for their customers as well. That helps with that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ken. That education side and those conversations, and the shrinkage is hard to overcome.
I think the marketing though can be a double-edged sword, right? They're like, oh, the cloud, so easy. You can go up, you can go down, so malleable. If you need to grow, you can grow fast. You need to shrink, you can cut down fast. But oh, by the way, it's not always that way. You know what I mean? Like, the marketing is definitely part of the conversation, and it's not your marketing. It's the big guy dropping $1 million a day in campaigns, right?
Yeah. But it's still true, and you can have that conversation with your client and say, if you need to have absolute variability options, that's fine, and it costs you 40% more. Is that okay with you? And for some of them, it will be, very few, but some of them will say, yeah, well, that's just how we have to do business right now. The others, you can say, we can lock this in if you'll sign a 3-year agreement. Those are the clients that you really want, in my opinion. And so you can protect yourself with an agreement. But even if you're month to month, I think that you could do a true, valuation of your total expected loss and work that into the cost of your agreements, and you'll be okay. But
so if you do this reservation, this multi-year reservation to get the 40% discount, let's say, does it renew in the same term, or are you month to month at some point?
That's a great question. Ken, do you know the answer to that? Because I don't.
I do not, because I haven't seen too many of the 3-year rollouts because of the way people are trying to stay flexible. And, what I've seen is how well Nerdio manages the number so that people get a good feel for it and understand there's a percentage up or down that it could go. So I haven't seen that 3-year thing jump in that often, but it is a great question. It's probably something that would need to be figured out, because if it at the end of the 3 years, are you automatically rolling into another 3-year, or does it go to month to month?
Yeah, I would assume that you probably renew it on your own because of the way that it gets ordered. You'll have to renew it, but it would be another 3 years to lock in that price.
And then have you run into anyone that's actually made sense for them to do the dedicated servers? I mean, I know it's a newer thing in the last year or two, but
I haven't. I don't recommend that in most cases. I don't recommend even dedicated desktops. There are some use cases where people need them, but a lot of that is about education and a change in the way that the perception from the client is how they're going to use it. You know, one thing that I kind of want to go back to bucket 2 and just I think it was bucket 2, but the person that set up their own colo and they're hosting out RDS, presumably.
yeah.
One huge difference in Azure is that it's actually a Windows 10 multi-tenant or multi-user environment. So that is something they're not providing and cannot provide. They are not providing Windows Virtual Desktop in a Windows 10 environment. Now, they could be providing dedicated machines, but that's a lot more expensive to provide. So the variability or capability of rolling out and rolling in with the pool and all of that is really important. And that's the other thing that goes back to the conversation we were just having, is when you talk about reservations, Nerdio is going to show you where you should use reservations, but we're also going to show you where you should not. And through our auto scaling, which is automated, we can say, okay, you're going to lock in a single host for your WVD. You might need 10. We're going to turn on their other 9 when you need them, and we're going to turn them off when you don't need them. So you're going to save a significant amount there, right? If there's 24 hours in a day and they're on an average of 7 a day, let's say, then we're actually controlling the cost. We're coming out on the positive over a reservation because of the way we're controlling it. And that's the thing that's most likely to move if you have shrinkage in a company, because they still need their primary servers. Those are not going to change. So you've reserved those, locked those in at whatever size they are. Your DC, your QB server, your file server, those aren't going to change because the number of users you have changed. But the number of hosts, you might need half. And you know what? That's okay, because we haven't reserved those. We're turning them on when you need them, off when you don't. So we can actually reduce your cost if you get smaller as a part of that conversation. So that is one thing that's important to keep in mind. It's not all or nothing. And that's part of what we're going to show you in our cost estimator, is in the same way with the renting the OS versus purchasing it and bringing it to the cloud. Sometimes that makes sense. In other places, it doesn't. And we can have those conversations and show you that, and just by default, our cost estimator is actually going to, use a smart approach to that to show you. But that's a big part of what I do every day, is just talk through those scenarios with people of why they would choose one over another.
So Garrison, is this when you break it down like that, are those reserved instances? Is that where that comes in, where the breakdown is? I know the term reserved instances comes up quite a bit, especially when Joseph's doing his presentation. That's what these are, right? These are reserved instances, which is what allows you to do it not all in one piece, but those are the little pieces.
Right. A reserved instance is only associated with a single VM. So if you have multiple servers, you would do a reserved instance for each one. But then you also would reserve the host. A single host is what we always recommend, so that if somebody jumps on at 1 in the morning and wants to work, it's there and ready. But then the others can be turned on during the workday. They're there when the workers are there, and then they get turned off when the resource load drops to a certain.
How does it know that? Just like how long it's dormant? Is that how it is, or how does it?
We're monitoring a bunch of different things. There are different triggers you can set. You could do it by CPU usage. You could do it by average users, available sessions. So it's not just one way. But yeah, we're going to monitor that host and then have a trigger to turn on another one. And then we'll monitor that host. And when it falls below the threshold trigger that you have, then it'll turn it off.
Okay. So there is some choices here, right? It's not all one size.
No, it's not one size fits all. There are definitely some choices.
So maybe this is where, Ken and his company maybe can add some wraparound value, right? Like we talked with Joseph a little bit way back when, and he keeps on reminding people, hey, this is in your action pack. You actually have credit. If you never use it, you lose it. So why don't you do something and just start playing with it? But then like after that, they're like, how do I actually get started? And there's all sorts of programs around escalators and promotional kind of stuff that Microsoft does. If you get into it, you get moving and you get to a certain point in a certain time, like, and that's kind of where maybe Ken, you can fill in some of the gaps for anyone that's like totally ground zero here, which I think are a lot. I got to think, as many people who are in this, I think the larger percentage is not in it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a thousand different ways to go with this, right? That's what makes it so confusing. I mean, first steps are to determine what you want to do and how it works for you. And, from a PAX8 perspective, we have boot camps for your technical folks that actually train them on how to get through the technical portions of Azure. But we also, as Nerdio knows, Nerdio's at most of these boot camps. Nerdio helps with this guidance and helps make it so that they don't have to be Azure experts out of the gate. Something else that PAX8 does is we have a pro services team that will walk your team through it or do it all for you. So tomorrow, I could start an MSP tomorrow, sign on with PAX8, use their pro servers as I sell Azure jobs, let them do all the work. I collect all the mailbox money, as I like to call it. That money comes in, and then have Nerdio help manage it and move it forward. So basically all they need is their admin level tech to click and learn, the levers. Now, the cool thing about how this all works is you don't necessarily have to, again, rely on this. If you decide, hey, I want to have an Azure practice, I don't want to rely on PAX8 or anybody else, you have the pro services guys do it with your team so that they're learning how to do it. They're rolling through the process. And then when they get to the level where they need to be, they can go to PAX8 Academy, they can do the boot camps so that they're ramping up and the whole team can learn how to do Azure the same exact way. By the way, boot camp is free with PAX8 if you're a PAX8 partner. So you're getting these boot camps for free.
You can sign up to be a PAX8 partner for free. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, right. And there are things that cost, pro services cost money. It's not a cost center, right? We build it out to help out the partners. And then we, of course, highly recommend Nerdio to make all the back end stuff easier and the management easier, because there's no amount of training in the world that's going to get you to the point that Nerdio can get you to. That's the bottom line. That from that standpoint, Nerdio, like Garrison said, you plug it in, you set it up, you get people trained on it, and it moves. It does its thing, and it's going to save you money in places you probably didn't even know existed. Talking about those levers, Garrison, I'll let you take it from that standpoint, but we can bring you through that level to the point where you could start tomorrow and start doing Azure, and the best way to do it is with Nerdio.
Do you, where do people go to just start learning? I mean, obviously there's nerdio.com, I assume, but like, where can they get through the, I hate to say, cloud for dummies, but like just the foundation points, where can they get started?
Well, if you're coming to us, you come to our website. We actually do workshops every week. We do multiple different workshops. That's a great place to get started. We have a WVD review. We've got how to sell. We've got packaging. We've got a cost estimator one, and that starts to get you exposed to the terminology. And that's a great place to do it. We love our relationship with PAX8, and PAX8 has so many resources, and there's so many things, like even that question about the reservations. If I was on a call and I got that call today, I'd say you need to call your PAX8 rep and talk to them about that, because they know more about the nuances of licensing than I do, and they're going to, and we want you to leverage them as a resource. So that's certainly an option too. But this is the biggest gap right now, I think, in Azure and WVD is how do you learn it? And I mean, the other way is, give me a call. Like I'm having these conversations with people all day long, and there's no stupid questions, right? Like, it's like, let's just get in there and wrestle with it and ask me the kinds of things that you were, George. Like, okay, well, this is where I'm at. Is this real? Like, can I really make this work? I asked those questions before I came here. I called up my MSP buddies that were using Nerdio and said, is this for real? Is like, am I getting on a rocket ship or a sinking ship, right? And they were like, it's awesome. Like, hands down, over and over and over again, positive reviews about how it worked, how it helped them get into Azure where they couldn't before. And just the whole mentality of the company is so built around the MSP, because it's like 95% of us were at an MSP at some point. We were started by somebody who ran an MSP, right? So that is part of our DNA. And so just reaching out to us is a great place to start. And Ken, you may have some other resources that you can give people specifically, but I'd say sign up for some of those workshops and just get started being exposed so you can be fluent in, in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft does have some great resources. Nerdio has some excellent resources, free stuff that you can get started in, things of that nature. From a PAX8 perspective, I mean, my first suggestion would be reach out to your camp and say, I'm really interested in Azure, and they'll connect you up with a specialist that can talk you through everything. And our people believe exactly what Garrison did a great job of articulating. Listen, there is a reason to do certain things. There is no silver bullet. The cloud is not the silver bullet. Doesn't fix all things. It fixes a lot of things, but not all things. So they're not going to force you into, as George would say, the round peg into the square hole, the square peg into the round hole. No one's forcing you to, into any direction, but you're going to get that advice. And I would also say, look to your peers, go to your peer groups, talk to the folks that in your groups that do Azure and know Azure, see what they're doing. That's a good head start, at least get in the right direction. But go to those resources, talk to people, learn about it. I would definitely say don't stick your head in the sand over this just because you think it's hard or it's something that you never heard of, you never thought of doing before. The whole point of how MSPs are getting to the next level is pivoting. And one way to pivot, especially into the cloud in a big way, is through Azure and being able to use tools like Nerdio and things like that to make your life easier. You may find that going to Azure and Nerdio is a heck of a lot easier than some of the RMM tools that you're managing and some of the other things that you're doing. So I would really suggest, highly recommend, ask your friends that do it, reach out to your peers. You can reach out to myself. You can reach out to George. You can reach out to Garrison. We'll give you honest opinions. We're all MSPs from one strain or another, and love helping out the community. So separate from PAX8 or Nerdio, I'm just saying, I think that you should take a look at Azure hard and then make a decision if it works for you or it doesn't work for you.
That's good advice. Guys, I really appreciate everybody coming today. This was like really kind of a session that should have covered most of the people out there. That's why I kind of created those like roles, right? I think everybody's in one role or another. I don't think we missed too many. But this whole session was recorded. You can find it at mspinitiative.com under sessions. Rewind, fast forward, download, whatever. It's there for you. Garrison's a great resource. Find him on LinkedIn. Find nerdio.com. Obviously, you know where to find Ken. And if you can't find Ken, you can't find Waldo. So he'll help you out. I'll help you out. But definitely don't wait for help. Be proactive just a little bit and tip your toe in the water, or else you're gonna forget it, and then a year down the line you're gonna be that customer that's scrambling to shoot guns at the last
real
second.
Quick, George, Garrison, I sent you an invite to our call because I forgot to do it until we were on this call. So if you can make it, great, but it's every week, every Thursday at 3. I just sent you the invite so you have it for the rest of the Thursdays. So love to see you on there.
MSP community calls Thursdays at 3 o'clock. MSP Initiative every Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Channel Strong Tour coming to the Midwest end of May. If you're in anywhere in that area, reach out and come out because we'd like to actually see you in person. Thanks everyone, and catch you on Tuesday, or maybe at Ken's call on 3 o'clock. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye guys.